My name is Maya Chen, and today I learned that 3 years of trying your best means absolutely nothing when you're not good enough. The termination letter felt heavier than it should have. I sat in the Crimson Dawn Guild's sterile break room, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry wasps, staring at the words that might as well have been my death sentence. Termination. Insufficient performance. Insufficient performance. Such clean corporate words for "you're a failure." Around me, the usual lunchtime chatter had died to whispers. I could feel their eyes on me, some curious, most relieved. The guild's dirty little secret was finally being cleaned up. Status window, Maya Chen. Level 23. Rank, E-class. Strength, 12. Agility, 15. Magic power, 8. Guild contribution, pathetic. Those numbers burned in my mind like a brand. In a world where hunters were heroes, where S-rank fighters could level city blocks and A-ranks commanded armies, I was barely qualified to carry their equipment. Hell, most civilians had better stats than me. Finally, Jungwoo's voice cut through my misery like a blade. He wasn't even trying to be quiet anymore. Maybe now we can take real missions instead of babysitting an E-rank loser. His buddies snickered. Kim nodded enthusiastically. Right? I was so tired of splitting rewards 5 ways when 4 of us did all the work. Splitting rewards. As if my 0.2% contribution even counted. As if the handful of coins I earned from sorting damaged equipment could be called a reward. But what hurt most wasn't their words. It was the relief in their voices. 3 years of trying to fit in. 3 years of pushing myself beyond my limits. 3 years of believing that effort mattered more than talent, and all I'd managed to become was a burden they were happy to lose. Maya. Guildmaster Park's voice made me flinch. Even after 3 years. His tone still carried that edge of disappointment, like he was perpetually frustrated with my existence. I looked up to find him standing over me, his expression a mixture of pity and exasperation that I'd seen on every teacher, coach, and authority figure my entire life. The look that said, "We tried, but some people just aren't meant for this." "Clean out your locker," he continued, his voice carrying the weight of 3 years of failed expectations. "Your severance will be transferred tonight. Consider yourself fortunate. Most guilds would have dropped you after the first year." Fortunate. Right. Fortunate to have been kept around as a charity case. Fortunate to have been the guild mascot. Proof that Crimson Dawn was inclusive enough to keep even the weakest hunters employed. I nodded, because speaking would have meant crying, and I'd already humiliated myself enough for one day. The walk to my locker felt like a funeral march. Every step echoed in the suddenly quiet hallway as other hunters pretended to be busy with their phones, their equipment, their conversations, anything to avoid making eye contact with the failure walking past. But I caught their expressions in my peripheral vision. Relief. Pure, undisguised relief. No more failed raids because Maya couldn't keep up with the group. No more splitting loot with someone whose only contribution was not dying. No more awkward explanations to other guilds about why Crimson Dawn kept an E rank on their roster. My locker was a monument to mediocrity, a spare uniform that had never seen real combat, basic healing potions I'd never been strong enough to need, a few personal items that somehow looked even more pathetic in the harsh fluorescent light. "Maya?" I turned to find Hana approaching, her expression genuinely sympathetic. She was the only person in this place who'd ever treated me like a human being, instead of a walking reminder of what failure looked like. "I'm sorry this happened," she said quietly. You really tried your best." You tried your best. Even her kindness cut deep. Because trying wasn't enough, was it? In this world, effort was meaningless without results. Determination was worthless without power. good intentions couldn't substitute for actual ability. "Thanks," I whispered, shoving my belongings into a plastic bag. Even my voice sounded weak. I pulled out my hunter license, the plastic card that had once represented hope, dreams, the possibility of becoming something more than ordinary. Now it just looked like a joke. E-rank hunter license, valid for equipment management and basic support duties. The card clattered into the return box like my shattered dreams hitting rock bottom. The subway ride home blurred past in a haze of shame and self-pity. I stared at my reflection in the window, the same weak girl who'd been cut from the high school track team, who'd failed the college entrance exam timing requirements, who'd disappointed everyone who'd ever believed in her potential. 3 year I thought, watching Seoul flash by in streaks of neon and concrete. 3 years of scraping by on equipment duty, 3 years of being the guild charity case, and now what? Back to my tiny apartment, back to being nobody, back to being invisible. The worst part was that I couldn't even blame them. Young Woo was right, they shouldn't have had to carry dead weight. Park was right, most guilds would have dropped me years ago. Even Hana was right. I had tried my best. But my best wasn't good enough. It had never been good enough. When I finally reached my apartment building, I felt like I was walking through quicksand. Each step up the stairs felt heavier than the last, until I was standing outside my door with shaking hands, fumbling with keys I could barely hold steady. The apartment felt different somehow. Smaller, more suffocating. Like the walls were closing in on a future that had just become infinitely bleaker. I dropped onto my couch and let the tears come. 3 years of holding them back. 3 years of pretending that being weak in a world of heroes was okay. 3 years of telling myself that someday, somehow, things would get better. But they never did. And as I sat there in my tiny apartment, surrounded by the detritus of a failed career and a wasted life, I realized something that chilled me to the bone. This was it. This was as good as it would ever get. Maya Chen, age 25, former E-rank hunter, current nobody. A cautionary tale about what happens when you dream bigger than your abilities allow. Story of my pathetic life. But apparently, my pathetic life wasn't quite over yet. The next morning brought an email that felt like mockery. Final assignment, report to Storage Room C for equipment cataloging, payment upon completion. One last kick while I was down. Park was making me earn my severance by doing the job no one else wanted, sorting through 3 years of failed expedition gear, broken weapons, and magical items deemed too unstable for field use. Storage Room C was a graveyard of shattered dreams, cracked mana crystals that couldn't hold power, rusted weapons from hunters who didn't come back, spell scrolls that had failed when they were needed most. Perfect busywork for the guild reject. I spent hours sorting through the debris of other people's failures, cataloging items that would never see combat again. At least I wasn't alone. Failure loved company, and this room was full of it. That's when my fingers brushed against something that definitely shouldn't have been there. Hidden beneath moldy spell scrolls and tarnished equipment, a small obsidian pendant caught the dim light. It was beautiful in a way that seemed impossible. Perfectly smooth, perfectly black, with depths that seemed to go on forever. The moment I touched it, the world shifted. Words echoed in my mind, spoken in a voice that sounded like distant thunder. Seek the desperate. Seek the abandoned. Seek those with nothing left to lose. The pendant grew warm in my palm, and for the first time in years, maybe ever, I felt something other than despair. A whisper of possibility I hadn't experienced since childhood, dreams of becoming strong. What if there was another way? Before I could second-guess myself, reality dissolved. The storage room vanished like smoke, replaced by a vast circular chamber carved from obsidian that made the pendant look pale by comparison. I found my son. Elf surrounded by hooded figures whose very presence made my weak hunter senses scream warnings I'd never felt before. Danger, power, something far beyond anything I'd ever encountered. Finally. The voice came from the figure at the center of the circle. She lowered her hood, revealing sharp features and eyes like molten gold that seemed to look right through me. Though you're not what we expected. There it was again. That tone, that disappointment. I'd heard it my entire life, from teachers, coaches, guildmasters, and now apparently from interdimensional beings. I am High Priestess Seren of the Astral Covenant, she continued, gesturing to the intricate silver ritual circles that covered the floor like cosmic clockwork. You responded to our summons because you have nothing left to lose. Nothing left to lose. The words hit like a physical blow because they were true. Brutally, completely true. How did you... I started to ask, but she cut me off with a wave. Our realm faces extinction, Seren said, and suddenly the air shimmered. A viewing portal opened, showing me horrors I couldn't have imagined in my worst nightmares. Dying worlds consumed by creatures of living shadow, civilizations reduced to nothing by beings that radiated pure hunger, heroes falling like wheat before monsters the size of mountains. The Void Lords have devoured 3 of our 7 worlds, Seren explained as I watched entire planets disappear into writhing darkness. Our champions have fallen, our armies scattered, our hope nearly extinguished. I stared at the apocalyptic scenes, my mind struggling to process the scale of destruction. What? What does this have to do with me? We need someone the enemy won't see coming, Seren said, studying me with those unsettling golden eyes. Someone they'll underestimate until it's too late. Someone who understands what it means to be overlooked, dismissed, considered worthless. Someone like me. She didn't have to say it. We need, she paused, her expression growing intense, you to become our goddess of destruction. I almost laughed. The sound that came out was more like a sob. You want to make me, an E-rank failure who just got fired for being too weak, into a goddess? Power isn't always about what you can do, another robed figure interjected, stepping forward. Sometimes it's about what you're willing to sacrifice to get it. Seren nodded. The ritual doesn't create power from nothing. It unlocks what was always there, buried beneath layers of doubt, fear, and psychological barriers. Your extraordinarily low magical output suggests massive untapped potential being actively suppressed. Suppressed potential. The word sent a shiver down my spine. What kind of ritual? The rite of divine investiture, Seren said. It's simply, it would transform you at the most fundamental level, rewriting your very existence to channel divine power. And the catch? The robed figure who'd spoken earlier stepped closer. She should know the price. The mortality rate is 60%. Most candidates don't survive the power integration process. Their minds shatter under the strain, or their bodies simply dissolve. 60% mortality rate. Under normal circumstances, those odds would have terrified me. But as I thought about returning to my empty apartment, about facing a future with no prospects, no hope, no possibility of ever being anything more than a failure. What happens if I survive? You can never return to your old life, Seren said, her voice carrying the weight of absolute finality. The transformation is irreversible. You would become something far beyond human understanding. The person you are now would effectively cease to exist. I looked around the chamber at these desperate people, beings powerful enough to pull me across dimensions, begging a failure for help because they had no other options, just like me. No options left. I thought about Young Woo's relief when I got fired, about Park's disappointed sighs, about 3 years of being a burden, a charity case, a walking reminder of what inadequacy looked like. I thought about going back to that tiny apartment, to a world where I would never be strong enough, smart enough, good enough for anything that mattered. "What old life?" I whispered, and the words hung in the air like a death sentence. The chamber fell silent. Even the shadows seemed to stop moving. "I'll do it," I said, louder this time. Serene's expression shifted to something that might have been respect. "You understand what you're agreeing to? The pain, the risk, the irreversible transformation?" "I understand that dying as a goddess beats living as nothing," I replied, stepping toward the ritual circle. The silver patterns seemed to pulse with their own inner light, recognizing my approach. "I understand that I've spent 25 years being told I'm not good enough for anything. If there's even a chance, even a small chance, that this could make me into something that matters." I looked directly into Serene's golden eyes. "Then I'd rather die trying than live knowing I was too scared to take it." For the first time since I'd arrived, she smiled. "Perhaps we chose better than we realized." The hooded figures began chanting in a language that predated human civilization. The silver circles ignited with otherworldly light that made my weak hunter senses feel like broken instruments trying to measure the sun. As I stepped into the center of the ritual circle, I felt the obsidian pendant crumble to ash in my pocket, its purpose finally fulfilled. Maya Chen, E-rank failure, was about to die. What would be born in her place remained to be seen. But for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of the answer. They say that becoming a god requires sacrifice. What they don't tell you is that the sacrifice is everything you ever thought you were. The moment I stepped into that ritual circle, agony beyond human comprehension exploded through every fiber of my being. Divine integration initiated. The system notification burned across my vision like fire, but the words barely registered through the tsunami of pain crashing over me. Divine energy poured into my body like molten lava, injected directly into my veins, and I screamed, a sound that echoed through dimensions and made the very air tremble. They strapped me to an altar of black marble, because apparently, most people try to claw their way out of godhood once they realize what it actually costs. The restraints bit into my wrists as I thrashed, every muscle in my body seizing as power that shouldn't exist in mortal flesh tried to rewrite my entire existence. Error. Massive power differential detected. Warning. Host psychological framework insufficient. Override. Emergency stabilization protocols active. "Most candidates break during the first hour," Serene observed, her voice clinical as she watched me writhe in agony. "The pain forces you to confront every moment of weakness, every failure, every time you felt powerless. Break." I was definitely breaking, but not in the way she meant. The divine energy wasn't just changing my body, it was excavating my mind, dredging up every memory I'd tried to bury, every moment of shame I'd locked away, every instance where someone had made me feel small and worthless. The track team tryouts. Coach Wilson's disappointed sigh as he posted the list without my name. "Maybe next year, Maya. Keep training." But there was no next year, was there? There never was. The memory played in excruciating detail as the divine fire burned through my neural pathways. I could feel every emotion I'd suppressed, the humiliation, the crushing sense of inadequacy, the way I'd smiled and nodded when really I wanted to scream. The college entrance exam, staring at the clock as time ran out, knowing I'd failed again, Jung Woo's sneer. Finally got rid of the dead weight. Park's disappointed expression. "Consider yourself fortunate." Each memory hit like a physical blow, and the divine energy fed on them, using my own trauma as fuel for the transformation. My bones cracked and reformed. My blood turned to liquid starlight. Every cell in my body screamed as it was broken down and rebuilt at the molecular level. "I can feel your barriers," Serene continued, her golden eyes studying me like I was a particularly interesting specimen. "Decades of believing you're worthless, building walls around your own potential. The divine energy has to shatter those first before it can awaken what's been sleeping inside you." Integration at 23%. 45%. By the second day, I wasn't sure where Maya ended and the divine energy began. The pain had evolved beyond physical agony into something transcendent and terrible, a complete dissolution of everything I thought I knew about myself. Error. Psychological resistance detected. Why do you cling to weakness? Seren asked, placing her hand on my forehead. Her touch burned like ice. What are you afraid of losing? Through tears of molten light, because apparently goddesses cry liquid fire, I gasped out the truth that had been clawing at my chest since this began. If I'm not weak, what am I? The words came out broken, fragmented by the power reshaping my vocal cords. Being powerless is all I've ever known. If I'm not the failure, if I'm not the disappointment, if I'm not the one everyone looks down on, then who are you? Seren finished, and her voice carried something that might have been understanding. That's what you have to discover. That's what terrified me most. For 25 years, I'd been Maya the weak, Maya the disappointment, Maya the E-rank failure who couldn't do anything right. It was a horrible identity, but it was mine. It was familiar. It was safe in its own twisted way. If I wasn't the failure anymore, if I actually had power, if I could actually matter, who would I become? What if I became something worse? What if I became someone like Yongwoo? The thought hit me like lightning, and suddenly I understood. I wasn't just fighting the divine integration, I was fighting the possibility of becoming everything I'd always hated. But that's when something shifted. Instead of pushing against the change, I stopped fighting. The barriers in my mind, all those walls built from years of disappointment and self-doubt, didn't just crack. They exploded. Decades of suppressed potential erupted in a torrent of purple fire that lit up the chamber like a newborn star. The divine energy that had been fighting to enter suddenly found itself welcomed, embraced, integrated into something that had been waiting for it all along. Integration at 67%, 78%, 89%. The third day wasn't pain anymore. It was understanding. I floated in a space between dimensions, watching my old self dissolve like morning mist while something magnificent took shape in its place. But it wasn't a replacement, it was a revelation. The person I was becoming wasn't someone new. It was who I'd always been underneath all the fear and self-doubt. The weak girl who'd been fired from the guild hadn't been destroyed. She'd been freed. All those years of being told I wasn't good enough, all those moments of feeling powerless, they hadn't made me weak. They'd taught me compassion. They'd given me empathy. They'd shown me what it felt like to be at the bottom, which meant I would never forget to lift others up. System notification, personality integration complete, new identity confirmed, Maya Chen, goddess of destruction, final compatibility check. Divine essence merger successful. When I opened my eyes, I was lying on the altar, exhausted but fundamentally whole, for the first time in my life. Purple lightning crackled around my fingers like living jewelry, and I could feel new neural pathways humming with power I'd never imagined possible. But more than that, I could see differently now. The world wasn't just matter and energy anymore. It was flow and possibility. I could perceive the pulse of life in the stone walls, understand the mathematics of reality itself, feel the interconnected web of existence that bound everything together. Status update. Maya Chen, goddess of destruction, level 847, previously 23. Rank. Divine tier, previously E rank. New skills. Reality manipulation, novice. Void, touch, basic. Dimensional awareness, intermediate. Core understanding. Powers tied to emotional state and experience. Full potential requires training and wisdom, not just raw strength. How do you feel? Seren asked, and I realized she was nervous. 3 days of watching someone's complete psychological reconstruction would make anyone anxious about what might emerge. Instead of answering immediately, I sat up slowly and extended my hand toward a cracked pillar across the chamber. The marble was ancient, damaged by eons of use, scarred by countless rituals. Skill, reality manipulation. The stone didn't just repair itself, it transformed. The cracks became veins of silver light. The damage became beautiful patterns of strength. The pillar evolved into something more magnificent than it had ever been in its original form. Just like me. I paused, watching energy dance between my fingers like tame lightning. I feel like myself for the first time in my life. Not like someone new, like someone who'd finally stopped hiding. The divine power hadn't changed who I was. It had revealed who I'd always been underneath all the fear and self-imposed limitations. The compassion was still there, stronger than ever. The understanding of what it meant to be powerless was still there, now tempered with the ability to do something about it. I was still Maya Chen. I was just finally allowed to be everything Maya Chen was capable of becoming. The integration is complete, Seren announced, but her tone carried a note of amazement. In 3 days, you've achieved what most candidates require months to process. The psychological adaptation alone should have taken weeks. Maybe, I said, standing and feeling power flow through me like warm honey. I was more ready for this than any of us realized. After all, when you've spent your entire life being told you're not good enough, discovering that you actually are is the most natural thing in the world. They say you don't truly know yourself until you're tested. Turns out, they're right. 3 hours after my transformation was complete, Seren decided it was time for my first practical examination. No training period, no gentle introduction to my new abilities, just straight into the deep end with creatures that had been devouring realities since before Earth existed. Goddess boot camp, apparently. Before we send you against the Void Lords, Seren said, opening a viewing portal that made my new divine senses recoil in horror. You need to understand what you're facing. The portal showed me nightmares given form, creatures of living shadow the size of skyscrapers, consuming entire cities with casual hunger. They moved through reality like cancer, leaving nothing but empty space where civilizations had once thrived. One of them was currently eating what looked like New York. They are entropy incarnate, Seren explained as I watched buildings dissolve into nothingness. Everything they touch becomes nothing. They've existed since the beginning of time, devouring reality itself piece by piece. I studied them with my new senses, analyzing their essence, their movement patterns, Wait. I know what they are, I said quietly, and something in my voice made every hooded figure in the chamber turn toward me. What do you mean? Seren asked. The realization hit me like divine lightning. These cosmic horrors, these reality-devouring monsters that had destroyed 3 entire worlds. They're bullies, I said, and my voice carried absolute certainty. Cosmic scale, bullies who take everything from people who can't fight back. I'd spent my entire life learning how to deal with bullies. Bullies? One of the robed figures scoffed. These are primordial forces of destruction, not schoolyard. Look at them, I interrupted, pointing at the portal. Really look, they only attack what they think can't fight back. They swarm the weak and avoid anything that might pose a real threat. They consume because it makes them feel powerful, not because they need to. The chamber fell silent as they processed this. Youngwoo was exactly the same, I continued. So was every person who ever made me feel small. They picked on me because they thought I was safe to pick on, because they thought I would never fight back. And they were right, until now. Send me in, I said, power crackling around me like purple lightning. Let me show these cosmic bullies what happens when someone finally fights back. The first mission. 30 minutes later, I stood on the edge of a dying world, watching a void lord consume the last major city. The creature was massive beyond comprehension, easily 3 times the size of any building I'd ever seen, and its mere presence unraveled reality around it. This was definitely not E-rank content. But as I watched it methodically dissolve everything in its path, I felt something unexpected. Not fear, but familiarity. I'd seen this behavior before. The systematic destruction of anything that couldn't fight back. The casual cruelty. The sense of entitlement to take whatever it wanted. I'd lived with this my entire life. "You cannot stop me, little goddess," it hissed, turning eyes like black holes toward me. Its voice was the sound of stars dying. "I am inevitability itself. I am the end of all things." For a moment, just a moment, I felt the old fear. That instinctive terror of facing something infinitely stronger than myself. The familiar voice in my head whispering, "You're not good enough. You're not strong enough. You should just give up." Then I remembered Youngwoo's sneer, Park's disappointed sigh, every person who'd ever looked at me like I was worthless. Not anymore. "You know what your problem is?" I said, divine energy building around me like a storm. "You're so used to picking on things that can't fight back, you've forgotten what it feels like to face someone who actually can." Skill, void touch. I lunged forward, not at its massive body, but directly at its essence, the core of shadow and hunger that gave it form. For a moment, we were locked in a battle of pure will as it tried to consume me, to drain everything that made me who I was. But here's the thing about being devoured and surviving it repeatedly, you learn how to turn it into strength. Instead of fighting the consumption, I let it flow through my memories. Every moment of weakness, every failure, every time I'd been knocked down and had to find the strength to get back up. "You want to devour everything?" I said through gritted teeth, my power wrapping around its essence like chains of starlight. "Then taste what it's like to be devoured and survive it anyway." The Void Lord screamed, a sound that shattered dimensions, as I forced it to experience every moment of resilience I'd ever lived through. Every time I'd been told I wasn't good enough and kept trying anyway. Every moment I'd been knocked down and stood back up. Every instance where I'd found strength in places I didn't know strength existed. That's when I understood what my power really was. I wasn't the goddess of destruction in the way they expected. I wasn't here to annihilate things. I was here to destroy the things that made people suffer so something better could take their place. My power didn't eliminate the Void Lord. It transformed it. The creature of pure consumption became something else, something that could create instead of destroy. I watched in amazement as it began restoring the world it had been devouring, rebuilding the cities it had consumed. Teaching entropy what comes after destruction. Victory and understanding. When the battle ended, I collapsed onto the restored ground, exhausted but victorious. The fight had taught me something crucial about my new nature. My power wasn't about being stronger than my enemies. It was about being stronger than my former self. "Remarkable," Seren said as we returned to the chamber through a portal. "You didn't destroy it, you converted it." "Destruction doesn't have to mean annihilation," I replied, settling onto a throne that shaped itself from the stone floor to accommodate me. The gesture was unconscious. Apparently, being a goddess came with certain automatic perks. Sometimes the most destructive thing you can do to evil is show it a better way to exist. System notification. Character development. Milestone reached. New understanding unlocked. True strength. Definition. The power to lift others up, not tear them down. Power adjustment. Significant increase to all divine abilities. I looked at my hands, watching divine energy dance between my fingers, like tame lightning. For the first time since this whole insane journey began, I felt right. Not powerful in the way I'd always imagined wanting to be, not dominating or overwhelming, but strong in a way that felt true to who I'd always been inside. The other Void Lords won't underestimate you now, Seren warned. Word will spread that something new walks between worlds, something they can't simply consume. Good, I said, and smiled. For the first time in my life, the prospect of being noticed didn't terrify me. Let them come. I've got 25 years of dealing with bullies to catch up on. And now I finally had the power to do something about it. Maya Chen, former E-rank failure, current goddess of destruction. Some stories are about becoming someone new. This one was about finally becoming who I'd always been meant to be. They say you can't go home again, but what they don't tell you is that sometimes home needs to see what you've become. 2 weeks after converting my first Void Lord, I opened a dimensional portal back to Seoul. The familiar energy signature of Earth felt smaller than I remembered. Not physically. I could sense every dimensional rift, every hunter, every pulse of magical energy across the entire planet now, but smaller in scope. Limited. Like looking at your childhood bedroom after living in a mansion. Still, some conversations needed to happen. I stepped through the portal directly into the Crimson Dawn Guild lobby, and the effect was immediate. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. Coffee cups froze halfway to lips. Even the ambient magic in the building seemed to hold its breath. Presence. That was the word for what I'd gained. Not just power. Any S-rank hunter had power. This was different. This was the weight of divinity pressing against reality, making everyone instinctively understand they were in the presence of something beyond their comprehension. Jung-woo was the first to react, and not in a good way. His coffee cup slipped from nerveless fingers, shattering against the marble floor in a crash that echoed like a gunshot in the sudden silence. Maya? His voice cracked on my name. But how are you? Different, I said calmly, letting my voice carry just a hint of the harmonics that came with divine speech. The air vibrated around me, and I watched several hunters instinctively step back. Good. Let them feel what real power looks like. I got a new job, I continued, and couldn't help the small smile that played across my lips. Turns out there were better opportunities available. Guildmaster Park approached cautiously, his power-sensing device in his hand. The thing was screaming warnings, red lights flashing, alarms beeping frantically, as it tried and failed to measure something beyond its designed parameters. Those energy readings, he stammered, staring at the device in disbelief. You're completely off our charts. The machine can't even process what you are. How is this possible? This from the man who told me I should consider myself fortunate to have lasted 3 years. Turns out I was never weak, I replied, letting divine energy spark casually between my fingers. The purple lightning danced like jewelry, beautiful and terrifying in equal measure. The casual display of power was too much for their hunter instincts to ignore. Every single person in the lobby, A rank, B rank, even the S rank team leader who'd always acted like he was untouchable, dropped to their knees. Not because I forced them to, but because their bodies recognized what their minds couldn't process. They were in the presence of something that existed on a fundamentally different level than anything they'd ever encountered. I was just in the wrong place, I continued, watching their faces as the implications sank in, surrounded by the wrong people, trying to be something I wasn't meant to be. The room fell dead silent. I could practically hear the wheels turning in their heads. The frantic calculations of how much money they'd lost by dismissing me, how many opportunities they'd missed, how differently they would have treated me if they'd known what I was capable of becoming. Too little, too late. Young-woo, I said, turning to face him directly. He was still on his knees, sweat beading on his forehead as he stared up at me. Remember what you said when I got fired, about not having to babysit dead weight anymore? The color drained from his face. Maya, I was just... You know how guys talk when they're frustrated. I didn't mean anything by it. You were being honest, I interrupted, and my voice carried the weight of absolute truth. And you were right. You shouldn't have to carry someone who can't contribute to the team. I smiled, and reality rippled around me like water disturbed by a stone. So I found somewhere I could. The fear in his eyes was intoxicating. For just a moment, I understood why powerful people became cruel. It would be so easy to make him suffer, to show him what real helplessness felt like, to give him a taste of the powerlessness he'd made me feel for 3 years. But that wasn't who I was. That wasn't who I chose to be. Maya? The voice was soft, hesitant, but familiar. I turned to see Hana approaching carefully, her expression a complex mixture of awe, concern, and something that might have been grief. "What happened to you?" she asked quietly. Are you still you?" The question hit harder than I'd expected. For all the power I'd gained, for all the cosmic responsibilities I'd taken on, Hana's words made me feel suddenly, unexpectedly homesick. Not for this place, never for this place, but for the simplicity of being human, for relationships that didn't require explanations about dimensional rifts and cosmic entities. "I'm more me than I've ever been," I said softly, letting the divine harmonics fade from my voice so I could sound like the person she remembered. "But you're right to ask. The person who left here was broken. The person who came back is whole." "You seem so different, though." Hana struggled for words, her eyes searching my face for traces of the Maya she'd known. Powerful, obviously, but also lonely. Lonely. She wasn't wrong. "Power reveals truth, Hana," I said after a moment. "And the truth is, I was always meant for something bigger than this place could offer. But that doesn't mean I've forgotten where I came from. Or who was kind to me when no one else was." I gestured, and every hunter's status window lit up with the same message. Dimensional stability increased. Rift probability reduced by 78%. Courtesy. Maya Chen, Goddess of Destruction. Monster spawn rates decreased by 64%. Civilian casualty rates approaching 0. "I'm not abandoning Earth," I announced to the stunned room. "The dimensional rifts that have been causing problems, I can stabilize those now, make things safer for everyone. Consider it my way of saying thank you." Park's mouth fell open as he processed what the readings meant. You're single-handedly solving the dimensional crisis," he whispered. "The thing that's been threatening humanity for decades, and you just fixed it?" "This place taught me what I didn't want to be," I replied. "That turned out to be exactly what I needed to learn." As I prepared to leave, Jungwoo called out desperately, "Maya, wait." He stumbled to his feet, his voice cracking with something that might have been genuine remorse. I'm sorry for everything. The things I said, the way I treated you, the way we all treated you." I paused. 3 weeks ago, an eternity ago, his apology would have meant everything to me. I would have cried with relief, forgiven him instantly, been pathetically grateful that someone finally acknowledged my worth. Now it just sounded like noise, desperate words from someone who'd realized too late that they'd misjudged the situation catastrophically. "Apology accepted," I said simply, because forgiveness wasn't about him. It was about me choosing not to carry the weight of his cruelty anymore. "But Jungwoo," I add, Ed turning back to meet his eyes one last time. "Next time you meet someone who seems weak, who doesn't fit in, who can't keep up with your standards, remember this moment. Remember that you might be looking at someone who just hasn't found their strength yet." The words hung in the air like a prophecy, like a warning, like a promise. As I opened another portal to leave, I heard Hana call out softly, "Will we see you again?" "When you need me," I replied without looking back. "I'll always be watching over this world. All of them." And then I stepped through the portal, leaving my old life behind forever. Maya Chen, former E-rank failure, had finally come home. Just long enough to say goodbye. They say that with great power comes great responsibility. What they don't tell you is that sometimes the greatest responsibility is helping others find their own power. I floated in the space between dimensions, surveying the multiple realities that had come under my protection. Each world pulsed with life I'd helped preserve. Each civilization carried stories of hope I'd made possible. It was a good view for reflection. Status. Update. Maya Chen, Goddess of Destruction and Recreation. Void. Lords converted. 47. 12 still attending mandatory rehabilitation therapy. Worlds restored. 8. 3 more scheduled for next week. Dimensional rifts stabilized. 1. Monitoring 847 more. Cosmic bullies. Reformed. Too many to count. People who underestimated me. Significantly fewer than before. You've exceeded every expectation, Seren observed, materializing beside me in the cosmic void. Her expression was a mixture of pride and amazement. The Covenant expected a weapon. Instead, we got a healer. Destruction and creation are the same force, I replied, watching a newborn star ignite in a distant galaxy, one of hundreds I'd helped nurture back to life. The only difference is intention. I choose to tear down the things that cause suffering so something better can grow in their place, like tearing down the voice in someone's head that tells them they're worthless, starting with my own. Do you ever regret it? Serene asked quietly. The transformation, the isolation, the weight of responsibility for so many lives. I considered the question seriously. It wasn't the first time I'd been asked, and it wouldn't be the last. The honest answer was complicated. I regret that it took me so long to find out who I really was, I said finally. I regret the years I spent believing I was worthless. I regret how many people suffer because they're told they're not good enough. I opened a viewing portal showing Earth, where the changes I'd made were rippling outward in ways I'd never expected. Former hunters now worked as peacekeepers and teachers instead of just monster fighters. The reduced dimensional threats had allowed humanity to focus on building rather than just surviving. Art, science, philosophy, all flourishing in the newfound safety I'd provided. But regret the power itself? Never. I smiled, feeling warmth spread through my chest. For the first time in my life, I can protect the people who can't protect themselves. I can make sure no one else has to feel the way I felt. Besides, I added, opening more portals, I'm not as alone as I thought I'd be. The network of the forgotten. That's what I'd started calling them. Beings from across dimensions who'd been dismissed as failures, who'd been told they weren't good enough, who'd given up on themselves because everyone else had given up on them first. A boy from the crystalline realm who was too weak to be a warrior but turned out to be perfect as a dimensional engineer. A girl from the shadow worlds who was rejected by every magic school but became a master of reality restoration under my guidance. An elderly man from a dying planet who couldn't fight but had an unparalleled gift for seeing the potential in others. Dozens of them now. Maybe hundreds. You're building something, Seren realized, watching the portals show my growing network of allies. Not just protecting worlds, but actively seeking out others like you were, creating a community of the dismissed and forgotten. The universe is full of people who've been told they're not good enough, I explained, feeling my heart swell with purpose. Most of them just haven't found the right place to shine. My job isn't to be the only goddess. It's to help others discover they were gods all along. That's when he appeared. A massive void lord, easily 3 times larger than any I'd faced before, materialized in the space around us. But instead of the usual roar of hunger and destruction, it spoke with something approaching respect. Goddess of destruction, it rumbled, its voice like distant thunder across dimensions. You have converted our strongest warriors, healed our most wounded, shown us possibilities we never imagined. We wish to understand. No attack, no consumption attempt. Just curiosity. I approached without fear, extending my hand toward the cosmic entity that had once been pure entropy. Understanding starts with a question, I said gently. What do you want to create instead of consume? 3 days later, the former Void Lord had established the first interdimensional refugee camp for beings displaced by cosmic conflicts. 3 days after that, 2 more Void Lords approached asking for guidance on how to become builders instead of destroyers. The change was spreading. You know what the strangest part is? I mused as I prepared for another mission, opening a portal to a world where my cosmic senses had detected someone in need. I spent so long thinking I was weak because I couldn't do what everyone else could do. Turns out, I was just meant to do something no one else could imagine. System notification. New quest available. Find the forgotten. Locate and guide 100 beings who believe themselves powerless. Progress, 73-100. Reward, evolution to cosmic tier influence. Another day, another chance to prove that there's no such thing as worthless, I said, checking my destination through the portal. A young man about to be expelled from a hero academy for insufficient power. Sound familiar? Some stories end with the hero getting everything they always wanted. This story was about a hero who learned that what she really wanted was to make sure no one else had to feel worthless ever again. As I stepped toward the portal, I felt my power resonate across dimensions. Not just the divine energy of destruction and creation, but something deeper. The power of understanding, of compassion, of knowing what it meant to be at the bottom and choosing to lift others up instead of looking down on them. My voice echoed across the multiverse as I spoke the words that had become my eternal poi, Amis. To everyone who's ever been told you're not strong enough, smart enough, good enough, your story isn't over. Somewhere in the infinite expanse of reality, there's a place where your exact combination of traits is exactly what the universe needs. You just have to be brave enough to keep looking until you find it. And if you can't find it, well, that's what goddesses of destruction are for. We tear down the old world so a better one can take its place. Starting with the voice in your head that tells you you're not worth anything. That voice is wrong, and I'm going to spend eternity proving it. I stepped through the portal toward another broken soul who needed to learn what I'd learned. That sometimes the things that make you different are the same things that make you magnificent. Maya Chen, former E-rank failure, current goddess of destruction, and the patron saint of everyone who's ever been told they're not enough. Some people are born to greatness, some have greatness thrust upon them. And some of us have to tear apart everything we thought we knew about ourselves to discover that we were great all along. We just needed the right place to shine. Next episode. Preview. The goddess of destruction discovers that cosmic heroism comes with cosmic paperwork, interdimensional tax forms, and a very persistent reformed Void Lord who keeps asking for life coaching sessions. Plus, what happens when Maya meets another E-rank failure who reminds her uncomfortably of her past self? Find out in She Got Promoted from Goddess to Cosmic Therapist. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more epic manhwa stories. What kind of outcast protagonist should we feature next? Let us know in the comments below.